Well, we're wrapping up MacDonald's book. Glenn MacDonald, The Disciple-Making Church: From Dry Bones to Spiritual Vitality. How churches how churches look at what does it mean to be a church that's about making disciples. So it's been a lesson for us on discipleship, individually and corporately as a community of faith, as we have focused on Matthew 28. What does it mean to go out into the world and to make disciples and to baptize them and to journey alongside them, to teach them, so that they too might go forth to make disciples as part of the body of Christ, the church in the world. And the world so desperately needs the church in these times. So I want to share a story with you as we wrap up MacDonald's book. He finishes the last chapter talking about a spirit of servanthood and of stewardship. And so just a few words that he shares in a story. This is a story of two people named Stumpy and Martha. So I'm going to read this story, so I want you to think about it. Consider the experience of Stumpy and Martha. Year after year, they attended the fair in their home state, and every summer it was the same story. Stumpy was tantalized by the old-fashioned biplane in which anyone could take a ride for $10. And Martha was disgusted by such an obvious waste of money. $10 is $10, she would say. And Stumpy would go home without his airplane ride. And one year, Stumpy said, "Martha, that's the biplane, right there again, and I'm 81 years old, and I want to go for a ride." And Martha bristled, "There you go again. Don't you realize that $10 is $10? At this point, the man who owned the biplane and who had heard this conversation as far back as he could remember intervened. "Listen, you two," he said. I have heard this story, and I'll make you a deal. He said, I'll give you both a ride for free if you promise not to say anything during the flight. If you speak even one word, I'll charge you $10. Stumpy and Martha thought that sounded fair, and off they went. The pilot put on quite a show. He took his plane through banks and spins and looped the loops, and then he did the whole thing over again. Amazingly, he never heard a single word. When the plane landed, he looked over at Stumpy and he said, "I'll have to admit, I'm impressed. You never spoke even once." "Well," Stumpy said, "I was going to say something when Martha fell out of the plane. But you know, $10 is $10. If there is anything that Americans understand," and MacDonald writes these words, "it's the value of money. If there's one thing that Americans fundamentally misunderstand, it's the value of God. In the marketplace theology of our times, we may trust God to be there. We may trust God to hear our prayers. We may even trust God with getting us to heaven after we die. But the toughest challenge for the would-be disciple is trusting that God provides, that God will actually come through by supplying us what we need when we need it." Friends, God will provide. God will provide what we need, as MacDonald says and reminds us, when we need it. So this day, might you trust that God will provide. Friends, thanks be to God for a glorious day that God has once again given us. Thanks be to God.